My name is Dave Elving. I'm the interim director here at San Francisco Camerawork, and it's always a pleasure to join all of you online and introduce the talks and meeting artists and really being inspired by some of the compelling conversations we've hosted over the last couple of months, even though we can't be together. So tonight we'll continue that. As we go along, as Rodrigo was already saying, as you have questions, please feel free to just post them in the chat. And as we go along, I will kind of synthesize those questions and ask them of Rodrigo as we go. And we may or may not have some time at the end, but we'll just plow through it. As ever, we are recording, so if you would like to ask a question and you turn your video on, please be aware of that. If you'd like to remain muted and have your video off, that's fine too. That's really all of it. The only other thing I would like to add, as ever, we are a nonprofit organization here at San Francisco Camerawork. Our ability to bring programming like this to you and for us to be together really is a direct result of your membership and your support of Camerawork. So if you're already a member, thank you. You're the reason this is possible. If you're not a member, you can visit our website at sfcamerawork.org, and we would love your support. For the introduction tonight, I'm actually going to hand it to our board president, Michelle Branch. Michelle, can you take us away?
Everyone, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm really delighted to be here tonight to welcome all of you, and in particular to welcome Rodrigo Valenzuela. So Rodrigo is a professor at the UCLA Department of Art, where he has been on the faculty since 2017. And he's a Los Angeles-based artist working in photography, video, painting, and installation. And using autobiographical threads, he uses those to inform a larger universe of his fields of experience. His work constructs narrative scenes and stories that point to tensions found between individuals and communities. And much of his work deals with the experience of undocumented immigrants and laborers. And at UCLA, he teaches graduate and undergraduate students in photography. Rodrigo is a real craftsperson in photography, and you can really see the labor in his work, which he'll talk about, I'm sure, tonight. A little bit more about Rodrigo is that in 2017, he was the recipient of the Joan Mitchell Award for Painters and Sculptors. He has been an artist in residence at Lightwork. He's given talks for the Penumbra Foundation. And the way that we first met Rodrigo is he was introduced to us by our board member, Monique Deschen. And Rodrigo participated in our annual benefit auction last year and attended, which was really wonderful to get to know him. He's a really delightful person. And I'll hand it over to you, Rodrigo. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you for having me and for inviting me and everybody for joining. I hope, so I'm gonna start, this time I'm not gonna show video because I mean, I wanna try to move fast through the last, 8 or 10 years of work. And, but all the videos are available in full length on my webpage. I just wanna maybe talk about them in context of the work, of the photos and installations, but I'm gonna start from the beginning. I wanna, one second. I need to share. So I'm gonna start very simply with, this is what I was doing doing my grad program at University of Washington. When I moved here, I moved to the States around 2005, and I was undocumented for a long time, and I was working construction, and I lived in Boston. I lived in Montreal, Boston. Moved to Olympia, Washington, where I did my undergrad at Evergreen State College. It's a very hippie school, and I really enjoy. At that point, I wasn't an artist really. I mean, I wanted to make videos, I wanted to make art, but I didn't, and I still feel like, I always thought that it wasn't smart enough to make art. So and the same in Chile, growing up super poor, you think that there are people that have that style of like a way of being that allowed them to make art, or like things that like they're thinking, right? So like when I went to school in Chile, I went to history of art, study history of art, and I studied philosophy, because I thought that like being smart was a way to like kind of be around the arts, right? And reading a lot and feeling like an intellectual, it was a way to like not feel poor, right? I mean, at least you can have these great ideas that doesn't need to reduce you to like your income, right? So for a long time, I was just kind of searching for what to do. And when I was as an undergrad in Olympia, I keep making videos and photos in response to the text. So one reason is because English is not my first language, so I felt really limited by the language. But I think also that lack of language was also a huge possibility, because there is a feeling that I know how to transmit, but I can't point at, with language. So I started, and that by then I applied to grad school with all these videos I was making about philosophical texts. So it wasn't very cohesive body of work, but there was a certain quality in it. So I started going to school, and I kind of felt experimenting and being around people, and I kind of like watch all my peers being like, oh, that is how I make art. Oh, that's how you make art, right? And when I moved to Seattle, I was kind of trying to collaborate and help a lot of artists, because I wanted to learn how artists think, what artists do the rest of the day, and I still, it's kind of a big question on me as a teacher, is like getting in the mind of like what an artist think when it's in the car, waiting for a coffee, like how you think about the world. I'm gonna elaborate later about this, about like kind of how to use your like position in the world as a like departure for thinking about image making or video and installations, right? So, but for a long time I didn't know what art to make, like what kind of work to make, right? So I early on I was making this video about my life, and I felt short. I felt like that was like something that I didn't know how to transmit. So during my education, I started making this kind of photo collages that you see here. This is the Builder, which were like all these images of traveling around Chile and Peru and Eastern Washington. While I was working construction, I was like stop by and take some pictures. And actually I was doing like working in remote places, just building sheds or like, doing driveways and stuff like that. So I was making this kind of like little installations in the middle of nowhere, and kind of having this big archive. One of the reasons I was making this is because like after 7 years, finally when I got my green card, it was the first time I was going to visit my family. I haven't been in Chile for 8 years by then. So I really wanted to, I missed them. But then when I arrived there, it just, I didn't have that feeling of wanting to stay, or I didn't miss the thing itself. I only missed the feeling of missing them, right? Or I have this feeling of kind of nostalgia, like without foundation really. So I was making all these works that they are, in that case, they were kind of collages of these places that don't really exist, but kind of evoke this romanticism that it was part of me, but wasn't like really tangible or real in some way. So another one is, I was making a lot of this performance and like kind of little things, gestures to like build a house, or, eventually as I'm working, as I'm becoming part of as I was becoming an adult, I keep thinking about my dad, and my grandpa was a carpenter, my dad was a mailman, right? And my dad, as a mailman, he would take me to work and like show me houses around the neighborhood that he would deliver mail. He's like, well, if I had money, I could buy this house. If I had money, I could buy this house. And so it's something that is very present in my work. It's like, what is the thing that you call home, or like what qualify, right? Because I haven't had a home in a long time by then, and I've been just traveling around, and even until recently, until I got this job at UCLA, I was doing residencies for like 6 years straight. Like I was just jumping from grad school to residency to residency to residency. So I was, 2 years in Houston, like a year in Nebraska, like just traveling around and doing shows and just driving my truck around. So I usually didn't have a studio practice very well with I didn't have like a place that so my studio was outside, and while I was working construction still, I could make this kind of like little performance that it kind of gave me more confidence with the camera, because at the time I have taken only 1 or 2 photo classes that, you know, so until I basically got to Skowhegan, and then this residency in Maine, that was my first big residency, and I haven't, like, until then, I haven't never had a studio, like a cube, like a place where you go and supposed to make art, right? And I see all these artists having a studio practice, or like or getting a major in studio art, and to me, like, the way to think about ideas or like think about issues that I was concerned was like more the seminar context, where like where sit with, like, you know, 20 other stoners and just talk about philosophy or like ideas, and it was like, and that was kind of like the thing that made me happy. So during my first kind of month at Skowhegan, I was just like, again, looking at artists and being like, hey, you want me to shoot a video for you? I can help you with the photos. Hey, I can help you with your performance. And I just really wanted to see how these people that go to like prestigious schools make art. But at some point you have to make something, you know, you see everybody working, and then you've been collaborating with like 11 people, and then you haven't made anything for your studio visit. You have nothing to show that it's like feels yours, right? So I started making this series, which is like, it was very meaningful to me, because I started using the things that was familiar to me. To me, it was like using photocopies and construction materials. If you divide everything that's been part of my life and just section, to me, photocopies is the material of bureaucracy. It's the thing I did to become a resident or become legal in this country. I was like just always making paperwork, always applying to stuff, right? So making these landscapes out of these landscapes I already had from these synthetic landscapes that I was building with before in the darkroom, with like scenes from Chile, from California, from Eastern Washington, from Peru. So I was starting making photocopy, and it felt very normal, because that is what kind of the American dream was made for. A lot of paperwork, a lot of bureaucracy. That is how they keep you trapped with certain power structures. It's like taking you around with a lot of photocopy and paperwork. So using the materials I found around, I was making these like kind of like spaces, right? And I had fun making this work, and it was very interesting. But to me, the big problem that had that is exactly what I was avoiding in Chile. And one of the reasons why I didn't like to make work in Chile was because there was a hierarchy on production in Chile, and in Latin America in general a lot. I mean, you can because we're so far away that we get just the hits, right? So like, and you get, and there's a big problem in Latin America, specifically in Chile, with the history of representation, right? So, and because the problems in art in Chile are so academic, you are reduced to like be talking about, you know, history of representation, and like I'm making references to Delacroix or Jericho, or like, you know, so like if you are a really great photographer or artist if you can make a beautiful painting that have the composition of a Caravaggio, right? So like, and you see it here too. People get rewarded by like imitating some standard of the European canon. So to me, I felt very dissatisfied, even if I was happy, because I was finding the voice through materials. I felt that like this is not what I didn't want to do. These compositions that are like that aiming to like kind of do some sort of trompe-l'oeil. But again, something that like you do in when you are reading a text, you don't switch the page when you don't understand something, right? And artists often do that. Artists, they don't have an idea that they are working on something that doesn't work, and then they switch. Then they're just like, oh, I start this project, right? Oh, I start this other project. Oh, I start this other project. And then you go to so many studios that people have like 4 or 5 unfinished projects. And it's like, and it's interesting to me, that mentality, because to me, the only way to resolve something, or like even move on to that, from that project, is double down on the problems of that project. So you still can tackle it in a different way. So in this case was like, I don't want to switch the materials. I know there is something meaningful in the materials. I just is my perspective, really, literally my perspective in the camera, or my personal perspective. So the only thing I did with the next project was like zooming out, like evidence in the production, because that is the thing that is hidden from you when you are like a person that doesn't have access to those kind of like secrets from the academia, or going to a very good art school, right? So I always was curious, or like how people make art, what they do when they go to the studio. So for me, presenting how the images were built, it was much more interesting. So I started like playing around. Also, it's just like, it was so much more fun to be less careful, but also be strategic about the destruction. And also involve your body in it, just destroy things that they're like, they're hard to live. And ever since then, I've been working with kind of my scale. Like, so a lot of the sets that I work with, they are 8 foot by 8 foot, like 16 feet by 16 feet, something where I can go and move my body. So in some way, a lot of the work is just as much as a performance of an artist making the work, as much as an image, right? So in a lot of them, you will see that things are evidence of scale, but not only the scale, there are the materials that are actually used to work to make the image that are present in the composition, right? So a lot of and because I have all these ideas that happen while you're making the work, you don't necessarily need to be thinking about the work, right? There is a moment where it's kind of parallel, you know. And I don't start the work, I don't start one project knowing what the project is about. I have a good feeling about it, and then I really believe in kind of parallel thinking, in this like reading, researching, and making. It can happen all at the same time, right? As I say to my students often, that, I mean, something I want them to avoid, and I want to avoid, is being a tourist in your studio. Like, I don't want to make sketches and know what they're going to make and just go into the studio to just make it, right? It feels like, it would feel that I am not willing to discover anything in this process. So as I go and make, and I have the right ingredients or materials that I need to present my work, I start like elaborating some sort of discourse. And a lot of the discourse come from even later, with like when the work is made, or the work is kind of like almost finished, and I have people over and I start talking about it, right? There is things that in some way the work have to be smarter than you. So a lot of things that you will, that way I think sketching or like really thinking about it so much will not help you, because then why make it anyway if you already have everything figured out? So so a lot of the time I'm making, and why I'm telling this, because I'm making, as I was making the Goalkeeper, this series, I was shooting a movie too. I had a set in the other side of the studio. At this time I was teaching at Cornish and at this art school in Seattle. So I had a big studio that I could use in the weekends, which usually is where they have the final shows. So during the year, no one uses it. So I was just having all these stages, all these props to use for my photos. And at the same time, I hired some guys to work on this set to make a movie. And during these breaks, I could listen to play soccer. So we can just like, I could just kick the ball and like play around and take pictures of them kind of jumping and playing around, right? This is when they're building the set. And and as I say, like, things happen as you're thinking, as you're making, you're thinking, and you like, and you're rethinking the projects and like, and redirecting your ideas and your energy. So in this case, they were making the set for Malia TV. And at some point, I used to start taking pictures of them working on the set. And I realized that, that they were, these guys are, they're making a set that's supposed to be perfect and ready to disappear, because the green screen will eventually be erased to like put something there. And at the same time, these workers will disappear because if they do the work, and it's something I was very familiar and close to it, because when I lived in Montreal in my early 20s, I worked in a cleaning crew at night, cleaning the offices. So I'm very like aware of those kind of jobs everywhere I go, where like the jobs that you don't see, the jobs that people do at night. And usually I stay in my office until late scanning, and so I become really close friends to in this case, the guy that cleaned the offices at UCLA, right? So like I talk a lot about like these people that like they are their job is disappear. It's like they are specialists in disappearance acts, right? It's like the basket is mysteriously empty every day, or the jobs, like the wall need to be completely like untraceable to the hand. So, and this led me to the next body of work. To me, that was like my first museum show was completely about this, the maintenance of a city and the destruction of a city, and like how people become present in this invisibility, right? I will be making it more clear now, because so Maria TV is a movie that I made with I don't want to put the audio so we can move a little faster, but it's based on a Chilean soap opera, and basically I give the first part of the soap opera for I hired 15 real maids in Seattle to learn how the script of this telenovela, and then the whole movie, I'm interviewing them, I'm asking about their personal experience, and I weave this with this kind of ongoing rehearsal of like them trying to be like the maids that you see on TV. And by the fact that they're the kind of bad actresses, or like or just like kind of hard time following the script, is evidencing the flaws of representation of the working class women, right? To me, it was very important because I grew up with like 5 women in my house, and you never see people like them on TV, right? Even if the television is made for them, right? So it's like there's a constant feeling of like you don't belong, even you don't belong to your own culture. Mostly in Latin America, where everything is super classist, and like and there's a person that you see that you never see in your everyday life, right? So at some point, the maids get sick of the character they've been playing, and they start addressing the camera as almost as the male gaze, and addressing it as like this cultural machinery that have placed them in this role.
Miedo a lo que digo y sin que nadie.
Right, and that is there's a question. I saw like a I don't know how to see it. I mean,
Michelle had a question that I wonder if she would like to just ask.
Yeah. How is different you photographing people?
Maybe I put you, there you go.
How is different you photographing people rather than landscape and constructed spaces? Like I don't use, I mean, you will see it, the series that I did with the workers jumping and playing soccer is a very rare thing, although my videos have a lot of people, right? And I don't wanna, one of the reasons why the biggest difference in my mind is that in the photos, because the materials are inanimate objects, but they are carrying a cultural history that is very rich, right? So to me, the material, when I make movies, the movies only have people, and I don't write the scripts. I only guide them into the conversation that they already want to have, right? So to me, the movies, because I'm unscripted, and the only thing I do is like use my judgment to guide their conversation into something that can feel like my art. But I would never tell them what to do, how to say, or how to look, or how to dress, right? At some points I have given t-shirts to make this soccer match and to unify certain elements. There have to be a certain cohesiveness for the narrative. But the conversations usually is conversations that they already are having with their friends, with their families, So like to me, it is very important to kind of respect these things that emanate from the people and from the materials. So in most of my photos, I just let the materials speak for themselves, and I kind of like, and that is kind of the fun part of my job is just like I look at objects and I think about them as intercultural material. It's like how this piece of wood, or like what kind of feelings evoke that, and like how it can make it part of a sentence, right? How all these things become words and in some way alphabetized materials and make them form sentences that they are aligned with my discourse. So I don't, in some way, I don't just technically, I don't shoot them differently. Like in some way, I'm very lazy photographer. I just have the camera in a tripod and I don't fuck with it too much. I use, just for the people that I use a f/22 and very long exposures. So like I try to get everything in focus, and the camera is always from the same angle. Because to me, it's the performance, it's the thing that happen in front of the camera, right? The things that you create, even if people are not something that you can, the things that you make people do, so like or the portraits, you are not entering the realm of creativity, but there is, to me, the performance, what you do to get those performance, the materials of people, to me, is the interesting part, right? So I don't want to think about the camera as this like thing that I can be considered talented, right? And it seems silly to say, but like I am in a big fight with this idea of talent, and this idea of like, to me, having some sort of sensibility and like trying to evoke some sort of like poetic gestures is where the creativity comes from, not necessarily about like how crazy or how wacky you can make something happen, So to me is, so I will elaborate more, but like you will see very few people, but in the videos are very crowded. And I use 15, 10, 20 people in all the videos because I let them be themselves. And I think something interesting happens when you create the conditions for connections to happen. So, I'm sorry, you can hear my dog barking in the back?
We can, but it's okay.
She hates people having fun, and I think there's something.
Well, I'm glad you're having fun, Rodrigo.
Well, I think there's people outside having more fun than us, and that is the people that she is trying to like eliminate. So, so this is like basically my first museum show became these ideas that I was telling you about invisibility, and also my conflict of relationship with photography, which I really love. I really love history of photography, and I love in some way even history of presentation. I was, this is funny. So let me open the door. So sorry about that.
That's good. It was sort of charming, and we saw you recede and come back from the darkness. It was cool.
So the first. So you want to see here because of that. The first museum show I did, it was thinking at the Friar Museum in Seattle, which was very lucky because it was like only 2 years after I finished grad school. So it created a different space for me. Until then, I have only one solo show in this small gallery in Seattle. So I was so, challenged by the idea of the whole space, and also the idea that the museum that give me opportunity is it frames itself as a place for only representational art, right? There is no, you can show abstract art in that museum, which is a very interesting mandate in some way, but so, and again, to mix it with the idea of that, at that point, I was after I got MFA in photography, I was super frustrated with not getting anything. I was doing residencies in art, and I was getting awards as a sculptor, as a painter, but I was never, I was but I work in photos. So every single time I was applying to shows with these photos, people would be like, they're great. Can you make an installation in here? And I was like, they're photos. They're 1 editions. Can you just show the photos? And also for a while, I was like taking anything I can. I just like going around the country doing all these like random installations, and I started making these photos, thinking about this kind of like regrets I have with photography, or this like I was seeing a lot of people taking getting awards and recognition for going to Detroit or Pittsburgh and taking pictures of ruined porn, right? You probably like, and I was like, how hard is that shit? Like, I mean, it's like you just take pictures of abandoned buildings and in the sunset, and they're always amazing. So why, like, how that is hard? I mean, so to me, the problem is like how you become responsible for the space where the work was, right? What is the story of the building? How, like, but and then more so I was concerned about like, what is the feeling that wanna make you wanna go there, right? So like I was interested in the problem in a different way. So I was like, what is the feeling that, it's funny because now I wanna go to Pittsburgh and Detroit because I'm researching, I'm doing this fellowship, researching about the history of labor unions, which is like something that could have saved those places to be, you know, like economically, collapsing economically, you know. So I will talk about it in a little bit. But so I started making all these photos that so this is the museum where I transform all the space, you know. And I asked them for a scaffolding to make these drawings in the wall. They're graphite drawings, and I was just like, and I just asked them by the end of the installation, I was like, hey, can we keep the scaffolding? And they were like, it's gonna cost us like so much money. It's like, but rent it for 3 months, come on, they just keep it. And then I put the photos on the scaffolding. So I was lucky that Joanne, the director of the Fry Museum at that time, she is an artist, curator, and director. She will take a lot of ownership of some of your ideas, and like, but she will work with you to make the best show. Like, so I was happy that like I didn't have to deal with a director or with a board. I was just like directly talking to the director of the museum and taking decisions with her about like what you can do or how you can do it, right? So the photos themselves, they were called hedonic reversal, and they were addressing that kind of, to me, it was like, what is the minimum common denominator for something to be called a ruin without taking advantage of a particular community, right? How I can transmit the feeling of ruin without have to profit of that history, right? Or like, so I started kind of playing in the studio, and that again, it was like, I had a small studio. This was when I started the core program in Houston at the Museum of Fine Arts. I was just like using I had like a 300 square foot studio. So making the backgrounds helped me again to build that space that I didn't have, like physically, right? So I was making all these physical interventions and kind of, and also playing around. I mean, in a lot of them, you can see my footprint on the floor, right? So again, it's like the scale to me of these things is very important because it's not that I don't want to make it an optical illusion. I don't want to make it a place where like it would feel to me like taking a little bit of a shortcut to not actually lift the things that look heavy, like make it feel that I'm, you know, but also maybe my blue collar mentality, or the idea that think of like kind of imposter syndrome in the arts, that I feel like I need to work hard because I need to validate my position in this place, right? So maybe nobody would care if they were a miniature, but to me it's important that I make them big and they're heavy, and there's a limitations for the things I can represent, right? At the same time, I had this 3 channels video. While I was teaching at Rice University at the time, I was teaching drawing. So I had access to all the facilities at Rice. So I could go every night that the team was playing. And I was, at that time, I think it was mostly because the Seahawks have won the cup. And then the streets were a mess in Seattle. So in my mind, there was like, how every morning, the celebrations every night, and every morning these things are like completely clean. And again, coming back to the idea of the people making the green screen. So I start following the cleaning crew every night. So I could go in the morning sometimes. I could go at night. So I made a 3 channels video. One following the crew in the morning, because at night after the games they pick up the big trash, the the containers, and they sweep a little bit. But then at night, in the morning they go and hose it off and with a leaf blower and take all the dust, so things are clean, so you can come back and express yourself with passion for that college team again, right? So there is this kind of like this regard of labor that is very interesting to me, in the way that like where like passion overpower care in some way, and like a lot of the time you just go to places and you feel like you can express, you can just destroy, right? Like that happened in hotel rooms, and that happened in stadiums. And so so I had the 3 channels. One of the channels was like one of the cleaning crew guys making a diagram of what is the strategies that they use to clean the stadium. And on the other 3 channels was one during the days and one during the night, right?
Now here's why you can
not like but there's very observational, like and I have an audio of a pet talk of a coach talking about it, right? So they are it sounds like the coach is the one in the left making this diagram about the stadium, but to me it was very interesting that one of the interesting things is like I went to trying to do this project because I'm in Houston, I will make all this the cleaning crew, it's gonna be Latino guys. So I thought I could get interviews and a lot of like, but when I started going there, I encountered that like most of them were like ex-inmates, older black men, that they were like, and they were working under the table and just basically just like working for like $7 or $8 an hour, just like every day was a different crew in some way. So there were a couple of guys that to keep the continuity, there were a couple of guys that they were the same guy that I could follow, and one of the guys is the guy I end up interviewing for the project and making the drawings. So yeah, the video just followed the cleaning crew for a while, right? And this led me to like another project that I based on living in Houston, right? Which is complicated to talk all the time, and I don't want to like I don't know how to start this conversation, but it's like with the students, I talk a lot about this kind of capacity of artists to like figure it out, the world that they want to live. And that is why I think like science fiction and narrative and mythology is very important, because you have the freedom to like envision the world that you would like to live, right? I mean, there is so much tendency in arts to like just point at the things that are already happening and kind of make an example of it. And that come back to this idea of being kind of like a tourist, or being kind of like a reporter. And to me, I mean, our imagination is so much more interesting because we can present interesting possibilities, right? So I did this project about when I moved to Houston, I was like was 2014. So before the conversation about taking down the monuments, I was like, this is fucked up. That's like how people can live with this. I mean, but it's not different than Latin America. I mean, I could think it's fucked up because the Confederacy is so present, and it's so present in the third world in Houston, where it's historically black neighborhood, where you have like, terrible people like that, like wanted to kill you, like there in a monument. But it's not different than having Pedro de Valdivia or like a conquistador in the center of the, But to me, again, as I said, as a joke, is that there's a small proposition is like, to me, like putting monuments of the good guys is really complicated, because then you enter this like problem of who they are the good guys, right? And you try to take the bad guys, and then you have to go through too many like legal hoops and like moral hoops about like history and respecting history and learning from it, whatever the argument is, right? To me, I feel like that could be, it's an interesting thing to talk for us as a society, but doesn't feel that thoroughly creative project, you know, cover it with blankets, you know, graffiti. It is, you're still affecting the same thing. The problem to me is keeping the bad guys or the problem in the center of the conversation. So thinking about Latin America too, is thinking that how much these places, when you are under a certain level of ignorance, you can also, they become part of your life in the way that like you may give your first kiss right by the foot of this terrible conquistador or this terrible racist guy, right? So like they become centers of your life and they become landmarks in your life, right? They like, you meet a friend for drinks by the foot of the horse of this guy, right? And like they become this, so we're thinking, okay, I hate them, right? They're objectively terrible for you, for society, and we can figure out that. Me, as what is my job as an artist, right? It's like, what I love. So that is a question with a lot of social problems I have. It's like, what do I love in relationship to this? How I can make more of the things that I love rather than like focus in the thing, which don't get me wrong, I want to eliminate these things. And I would like to, and that is the reason why I asked the question, what do I love? Is to like generate this this conversation about what you want instead of those. Like, what is your proposition? Come out with an idea. Just don't say, I don't like it. Just say like, hey, can we have this thing? Right? So I was thinking a lot about these monuments. To me, they're monuments, right? They're like, it's called animitas, roadside altars. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood where people get shot a lot. So like, I had those things in my life a lot, and sometimes you see them in the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere. So to me, it feels so much more meaningful that someone cares so much about someone that will make this one little shine and have a beer, you know, and your favorite things don't need to be like a kind of PBR become meaningful when somebody that loves it put it there for you, right? It gets this like gravitas of love and care. So to me, was very important to consider, okay, why we understand this as a monument and why we don't understand this as a monument, right? One, to me, have a social component that is more important, you know, showing a local person that people loved and enough to like go day after day to put candles and stuff like that, right? So I make this piece in Houston where like I take all the components of a monument as we know it, but with the scale and the shape of like the animitas, the rosa altars, right? And together with that, so to me it was like making a box basically, or making this modular shape that you could give to somebody that lost their loved one, and then they can have their own monument, right? So you create a language because the question to me was like, what is the right aesthetic to keep somebody in the public consciousness? Maybe there is something that we just respect the scale. Maybe the scale is the thing that we really respect. Maybe it's the marble, or maybe it's the texture, right? It's putting you like feeling the coldness of the material that overpower you being is like the thing that you actually respect. I mean, obviously there is a fucked up history, but like I just fantasizing about like how we can find the material solution to this problem, right? And to me, I was like thinking, maybe I give this, so we have like 200 of these things, then we can think less about the other ones, right? And like we just really, so in the gallery, I was comparing the scale of the thing. And I embedded this thing on the wall. So you could be confronted when I start making the photos with what was the right scale of it, you know? So I was making all these objects and just like photographing them. And like the photos are almost like an IKEA manual, right? Possibilities of the thing. And this is the second presentation. This is the third presentation actually in Vienna. So, you know, to me, it was very important to show it. I mean, I insist on the project. I was like, again, it's like these things are not, the subject matter is dark. The photos are kind of like not really poppy or cool, you know. So like this show, it wasn't commercially successful in some way, but I really enjoy the conversations you have, right? It's like what is historical pain, right? And how you can and how you can make these public gestures to show who you care about. So, and it's talking about public gestures that you care about, you know, that is how that's kind of the language that I work for a long time. It's just like, to me, the same. It's like labor unions are the thing that would show brotherhood and caring for each other and caring for like the way that we live and work, right? I think we have yielded too much power to multinational corporations. So to me, in the last 3 or 4 years, thinking about, I mean, I don't think about it in a romantic way. Actually, I think they have it's a real possibility. After the Bezos and the Zuckerbergs of the world take over every part of our life, I think the only option will be the unions and come back to be a more cohesive force as a working class. And I think it's to me the disappearance of that feeling. It is this individualism that will kind of is collapsing in some way. And so to me, making these flags or labor unions, and at the same time that was I was in San Francisco doing this research. All these images actually was at CALA Art Institute in Berkeley doing the fellowship, and so I was learning how to screen print, and then I was going to the San Francisco State University, that they have this huge archive of Cesar Chavez time and at the Labor Center for Labor Research. It's an amazing little office on campus. So I was, so all these images that you see to the left, they are archive images from Cesar Chavez and from the Farmers Union. And then the flags themselves, they were an amalgamation of different labor unions that have disappeared. And then when you erase the letters and the numbers, they become these, symbols that really resemble soccer teams or military symbols, right? Or sport teams. And that is the thing that to me has become the last kind of record of brotherhood. It is, military. The only time that people agree on anything is one city agree on the same thing. It's come to sports and the military. So I think it's, and at the same time I made a movie where I hired all these guys, and how the movie is divided onto them playing soccer, organizing a soccer match, and then in between I cut for them talking about forming a union. So it in some way was, and then I shot this part of the video while I was doing the BEMI Center for Contemporary Art in Omaha, Nebraska. So, in some way I start one project in one residency, I wrap my stuff, and then I go to another residency and I make the video there. And I was just working in different places, in some way in between. I went to Chile to have my first museum show there. And my mom, my best friend, make these t-shirts for me with the logos of the labor unions. So when I flew back to do the residency, I shot the video in this warehouse, and they're discussing about forming a labor union, and just kind of failure of how we can find a language to talk to each other about, in some way advocating for each other and for yourself, or kind of find power in unity. And again, I mean, so I did that in 2015, I think. And then when I just moved to LA in 2016 or 17, I start making this series that, well, Trump got elected, and I mean, now it makes sense, and it's kind of it feels good. I mean, don't get me wrong, but this feels good when you're kind of right. Already when I was making the work about the the monuments, and then the monuments start falling. For a while I was like, oh fuck, now I cannot talk about that word because it feels like I'm just following a trend. But I did the work like 2 years before that, right? And now things start feeling a little bit better because like I was making this work about protests when Trump got elected, and I was seeing all the marches against Trump, and I was like, oh, that is really cute the way you march on a Sunday afternoon. It doesn't really mean anything. Like it's just not gonna alter anything. Like this guy's gonna be a dick anyway. Like and nothing's gonna happen. So it's like I think we need to destroy some shit. But it's not part of the language because like if you miss work, I mean there is not enough social protections because of the unions have disappeared. You really don't have a lot of power over your work and collective bargaining rights and like a lot of like and the protest of right, the right to protest is not part of the contracts, right? So a lot of people, the only time they can protest is on a Sunday afternoon, which nothing gets really disrupted, right? So I was looking at the images that are familiar to me in Chile, in Mexico, and all Latin America, So I was thinking about the like kind of like aesthetic of and the sculptural value of this language that, in some way, like, I mean, like the language that is missing of American culture, the language of protest, right? So I was like examining history of barricades and different types of barricades. So I started making this at the same time. Again, parallel thing. I was just like, to me, that was a feeling. I was like, nothing again. I thought that like having a protest with the Women March was great as as emotional component of it. But I felt that, again, it's missing a lot of unity in that, There was a big problem with like Women March not inviting enough Black women. There was enough problems with like a lot of the unity of the protest and the feeling good, just doing it because it feels good and not because you want to pursue some real change. It felt very like problematic, but also I was like interested in that. At the same time, I was reading this text I was reading this book of poems by Pablo Neruda called Canto General, which is a very big fat book of poems. It's like 5,000 pages of poetry where he tried to retell the story of Latin America from Latin American perspective, right? So at the same time, I'm thinking about the language of protest in America and the lack of language. I was thinking about this book that is a book of protest against colonialism, thinking but also it's beautiful, it's interesting, and it's very powerful as maybe the best book of poetry in the history of Latin America. But also it's written in Spanish, right? So there's a problem with like writing a protest book of the colonizer against the colonizer in their language, right? So there is like a very strong and could be if he could write it in Mapuche, the native language, nobody would read it, right? So like you enter a lot of like conflict areas with when you are thinking about the protest, right? And in the same way, when you're an institution, I mean, you of the institution itself to protect the institution itself, right? So in this case, I took a lot of the elements that Pablo Neruda talks in the book that are, thinking of Latin America as a giant coming from the ground up, right? So I start thinking about making all these elements made out of completely of clay. So the white of the materials or the grayness have to do because we were using all this clay to fabricate, to make molds and to like cover all the materials. At this time, I was making the series at Lightworks, so again, I take all these opportunities to kind of do residencies, but also switch my way of working. Each place have something different to offer, right? So I was shooting all these materials at Lightworks, and like the time was very tight. I mean, I was working only for 1 month, so a lot of the time I don't even have time to let things dry, as you see in the cone, I make molds and then I just have to like shoot.
Rodrigo, forgive me for interrupting. We're about 5 minutes out, and I think we're all absorbed by as you're going through it.
I will finish this series and then I will talk about the last one.
All right, thank you.
Well, together with that thing, I was thinking a lot about the protest mask and things that like come handy now. Again, this work was 2017, and I was thinking, it's like, if you need to protect from yourself from the cops, like how you do it with like home materials, right? So I was looking at all these images from Chile, Venezuela, Bolivia, like all the protests that we are very crafty about trying to like make masks. So I started making my own mask in the studio, and I was like covering, these are self-portraits where I was like just covering my face with the mask and using the reflective tape from the bicycles and just to shoot it with a flash, right? So it was very dark, so I wouldn't know my performance, right? I have my friend shooting this for me, but again, the camera is very much like set, and then it's just like, you know, I have clay in my body too. So the crack, you can see the cracks on my skin, and I have this also this like reflective dust on my skin too. And that is the installation I did, and then I transformed the whole gallery. I covered the walls with clay, and I made this kind of bird's eye view perspective of a tower falling down, and where I set up all this stuff. You know, it was kind of like a lot of cities. In Latin America, here you don't see it a lot, but like in every city you go, there's a huge telecommunication tower in the center, right? So I was imitating this telecommunication tower that I see in Santiago. This in the center of the, and I have the barricades series, you know, and then it's funny. One museum, the Jordan Schnitzer Museum in Eugene, Oregon, saw the show at the Friar Museum, and they invited me to the show. And then they were like, I want you to do the same, transform the whole museum, take over. And I was like, great, I want to take over, but you have to let me take over. Like, I want to take over the whole museum. And then I was thinking at that time a lot about kind of, again, this like, who owns the ideas, right? Like not only colonialist ideas, but also it's like, how is that every sublime painting is from a Europe? How is it like Europeans only can make sublime art, right? Like like when Latin Americans do it, it's pictorialism, or it's like regional paintings, right? It's like I wanted to like, my idea also was like having a show that could travel, because I wanted to take advantage that like every city in USA have a museum, and every museum have a terribly mediocre collection of American art, right? So like some local rich lady donates all their work to their collection, and they have to deal with that fucking thing, and they put it in, like they have a huge collection, and that's how museums make, right? The local couple donate all the work after they die, and they have a huge collection of really bad art, right? So like when they asked me to take over, I asked to borrow the walls from a past exhibition. I made this box, and inside I concealed all the work from the permanent collection that had to do with sublime. So you cannot enter that room. The only thing you can see it is through the cracks of my own work. So you can see the landscaping paintings that they're not great, but they just fierce. So like, you know, that is also addressed the idea of protagonism, right? It's like, can I make some mediocre art too, please? And have it in the museum? Like they're actually quite beautiful paintings, I think, but they're not great. They're like, you know, they're not sublime, but I want it, you know, like, so like I conceal the whole thing, right? You know, I was thinking a lot about the history, like this kind of like the gravitas that American art has. So I started thinking a lot about these ideas of like behind American, you know, the first time American art became famous, like, you know, with like Rothko and Motherwell and Franz Klein. So I started looking a lot about this work of the American modernist period, and thinking about like how, you know, how New York stole the idea of modern art, and thinking about the critique of like how much, you know, it was really fun to go during the summer and work as a painter in the studio, and thinking about that, like I'd taken a lot of the elements from Louis Ball's photos and then translating into some figures of onto like Franz Klein or Motherwell's compositions, right? Working in a very minimal way, but these photos have a lot of depth, and it's like I covered the whole studio with clay, and we made these pieces of like 2x4s and different shapes made out of hydrocal or like plaster mixed with graphite, right? So I was making all these compositions that I had to do with the searching for this, again, the installation in Vienna. And yeah, you know, so for a while, I mean, the new work is like, and the last show I did that came down like a month ago, it was, again, I'm doing the history of modernism in 3 parts and thinking a lot about Latin America role in this like idea of modernist ideals, right? And in post-industrial America, and how mostly because, you know, during the modernist time where these like things that look like high class or like high art is when America was fucking destroying everywhere. You know, there was like taking every government in Latin America, taking every government in Asia, right? So like to me, it's like this like refined taste that you associate with the 50s and 60s. It has a very fucked up history that like undermine the power of America, and as a like institution, it came to the blood to a lot of like third world countries, including Chile. That, you know, so I'm looking a lot about the modernist aesthetic of Latin America, thinking about Oscar Niemeyer and Gonzalo Fonseca. You know, taking ideas of that between words. Dadaist movements, you know, like surrealist movement. Like I talk a lot about between words movement to like get in that embody that feeling of like kind of making art as a means of survival and as a means of refusing imperialism and like massive powers.
Forgive me, Rodrigo. We are a little bit over time, but I thought what you just said, I thought was perhaps a really good moment. The idea of using art in this way. So I don't want to cut you off too soon because we are absolutely absorbed in this, and I think we could stay. And I would love to have you come back another time, but we're a little bit past 7, and I just want to take a moment to wrap us up, and especially to say thank you. You have taken us through an astonishing breadth of work that I think I can speak for the audience, is really just incredible. The consistencies throughout it all. Thank you for sharing so much of your
My
vision.
page is very well updated, and you can find my email there if you want to keep having a conversation about the work and about ideas that you can email me through like my webpage or my, you know, Instagram, and then as reasonably length questions, and then I will try to answer them as much as I can. But yeah, you know.
Thank you so much. That is wonderful. And we will share those links on our website, and we will eventually soon post this video for others to see, especially those who weren't able to join us tonight. As usual, I want to thank Christina Graber for producing this as native as possible, for our board president, Michelle Branch, who's here in the house with us and gave us an intro. And I saw our board member, Monique Deschênes, in the participants here. Who connected us with Rodrigo a while back. So thank you, Monique. And thank you to all of you who are here to share this with us today. You're what camera work is right now. And thank you for your support. As ever, we rely on your memberships and your donations, and you can do that at our website, sfcamerawork.org. And that's also where you'll find some links and this video eventually to see again. So thank you all.
Can I say, Rodrigo, I think we need to bring you back because there's so much here, and it's really rich. And I think people were so fascinated. Nobody asked a question, you know, throughout the entire time. But this work is just really incredible, and thank you for gracing us with an entire like history, which we did not finish, of your work and your philosophies and your intellect and your work ethic are really just astounding, and your visual sensibility. So people have been back channeling to me the whole time about how much they love this presentation. So I want to share that with you and welcome you to come back.
Oh, thank you. I will do it anytime you want, and hopefully I can do it in person soon. So thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate. And you know, again, anybody that have questions, just send me an email. I'm trying to be as available as I can. So just don't be shy and ask questions.
Right on.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Good night.